Good morning. I'm Haleh Esfandiari, the director of the Middle East Program. Before I forget, I would like to ask you to close your cell phones and your Blackberries and anything that is electronic, please. This is for our current speakers on the panel, the future, the next panel, because we are doing taping and it will affect the taping. So please bear with no Blackberry, no cell phones for the next hour and a half. We have had 175 RSVPs for today's meeting. I think because of the weather, we will have people walking in to the meeting gradually because the traffic is bad, the metro, the red line, which brings people to the center, is slow. So everything that should have not happened today. Anyway, let me welcome you on behalf of the Middle East Program and the Global Women's Leadership Initiative of the Wilson Center. The new director of this initiative is Rangita the Alwis the Silva. She's sitting here, and she will be chairing the next panel. Today's meeting is the second in a three-part series on how women have been faring after the Arab Spring, the Arab Awakening. So bear with me if I move between spring and awakening. Since the beginning of the Arab Spring, once the euphoria and the excitement of the revolution and regime change subsided, we felt a sense of unease, first among women activists with whom we were in touch, and then by the young women who were the force behind the regime change alongside the young men. One question for a number of women became, is the issue of women's rights being gradually marginalized? Another question was, can women's gains of the past few decades in the countries of the Arab Spring be revisited? For example, what will happen to the personal status law in Tunisia and other countries, or the law criminalizing FGM in Egypt? What will happen to the quota system for political participation in Morocco, Egypt, Iraq, and Jordan? What will happen to the representation of women in constitutional assemblies or their candidacy in presidential and parliamentary elections? How many women are going to join the cabinet? Women started talking about these issues. In the last 22 months, since the Arab Spring started in the little rural town of Sidi Bouzid in Tunisia, after the street vendor Mohammed Bouazizi set fire to himself, we have seen regime change in Tunisia, Egypt, Yemen, and Libya. We have civil war in Syria, and we are witnessing various degrees of unrest in countries all the way from Jordan to Morocco. As I was watching the unfolding of the Arab Spring and the massive participation of men and women in the streets and squares of Arab cities, being an Iranian, I couldn't help but remember the Iranian Revolution of 1978 and the excitement and the euphoria on the streets of Iranian cities. The revolution in Iran gave birth to an Islamic state that at first showed no tolerance for women's rights or women's participation in the future of the country. With one stroke of the pen, the new regime erased the progressive personal status law we women had fought hard to get enacted. As in Iran, what I saw in the Arab streets was the predominant role of the Islamists, some welcoming women at their sides, others shunning them. I have to share with you a Persian expression that comes to my mind. The person who was bitten by a snake is scared of a black rope. Having witnessed that what happened in Iran, I shared my anxiety with my Arab friends, men and women, and I was told time and again by them, we are not Iran. They were right. No two countries are alike. But we all remember that in the beginning, there were bright moments in the Arab Spring for women. For example, when Lilia Labidi, the Tunisian scholar and women's rights activist, became Minister for Women's Affairs in the transitional Tunisian government, one of her first acts was to convince the cabinet to withdraw Tunisia's objection to a number of articles in SIDA. We also heard from leaders of the revolutions in different countries that women are part of the process of rebuilding the state. However, our friends on the ground had a different experience, and we wanted to make their voices heard. For example, on the occasion of International Women's Day this year, we at the Middle East Program contacted a number of our friends, and some of you are in this audience and on the panel. We contacted them across the region and asked them for their reflection on how they think women have fared in the Arab Spring. Their overall verdict is captured in phrases such as concern, worry, disappointing, hidden agenda by the Islamists, a bleak season, retreat in human rights and civil rights. There were also optimists among them who had faith in the future and wrote to us that, to quote them once again, the current situation is temporary. This is the time for rejuvenation, a sense of pride. We are looking to the future, cautious optimism. In the introduction to that publication, based on these responses, I wrote, there is no turning back. As in Iran, where women have fought for their rights for 3 decades under the Islamic Republic, the women of Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, Bahrain, Yemen, and the rest of the Middle East are determined that the struggle for women's rights must continue. In the last 20 months, 2 months after the beginning of the Arab Spring, we at the Wilson Center have been holding 40 meetings on the Arab awakening, of which 21 were devoted to women's issues, and 8 were devoted to women and the Arab Spring. In the first few meetings following the Arab Spring, there was an echo of hope and optimism, and a sense that there was room for equal participation for women building their new societies. I remember, I believe, asking Dalia when she was here, what if? And she said, where there is always tahrir. So that was the sense of optimism. However, as the dust settled in these societies, women became more vocal about their fear of marginalization. And it was that fear that led us to hold in May of this year the first of 3 meetings, which was entitled, the first one was entitled, Is the Arab Awakening Marginalizing Women? We invited a group of women who were either experts on women's rights or had dedicated most of their lives to promoting women's issues in their countries and were witnessing the gradual erosion of their achievements. The proceedings of these meetings were published, and you can access the link to this and other MEP publication by going on our website. The link, there is a list of links outside on that table. Today's meeting is the second in that series. We have invited the next generation of activists, the generation who went on the streets and in the squares and pushed for change and became revolutionaries and sought equal rights for women. No segregation of sexes, no concept of women as simply complementing men. They demanded dignity, respect for human rights, transparency, the rule of law, and liberty. In our next and third meeting, we will bring the two groups together and examine the lessons learned. Today we are having two panels. As I mentioned earlier, I will chair the first panel, and my colleague Rangita will chair the second panel. On our first panel, I'm not going to give their bios, I'm just mentioning their name because we have distributed the bios, so please help yourself to the bios. Of Dalia Ziada from Egypt. She became known in this country as the woman with the pink scarf. And Robin Wright, a former colleague of ours, wrote a whole article about her and devoted a chapter of her book to her. So today she's the lady in the pink suit. Yeah. She's from Egypt, and she's the executive director of the Ibn Khaldun Center for Development Studies in Cairo. Omezzine Khélifa from Tunisia. She's a politician and works with the Ministry of Tourism in Tunis, and we hope that she'll manage to attract tourists back to Tunisia, which you desperately need. Rihab Elhaj from Libya. She is the co-founder and executive director of the new Libya Foundation in Tripoli. Her mother is with us in the audience. We welcome her. These are the mothers who raise such daughters. Fahmia Al Fotih from Yemen. She's a communication analyst and youth focal point analyst with the United Nations Population Fund in Sana'a. Hala Al Dosari, my namesake, from Saudi Arabia. She's a blogger and women's rights advocate and currently a Ph.D. candidate in Virginia at Norfolk, correct? That's it. At 11 o'clock, we'll take a break and we'll meet again at 11:15. Unfortunately, our President Jane Harman could not join us today, but we feel we are very fortunate at the Wilson Center to have her as a director because she is really passionate about women's rights. And she told me, why did I schedule this meeting today when she couldn't make it? But I said, you know, I have to suit myself after the panelists to bring these people from Libya, Yemen, and other countries. I think it's not very easy. So I would also like to thank my two assistants, Mona and Kendra, who have been in touch with the panelists over the last couple of months. And if they don't divorce me, I'll be very thankful. And our two interns, too. Thank you. And let's start with Dalia. You each have 10 minutes. Okay. And you can either speak from where you are sitting or come here, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, I'll move.
Okay. Thank
you. Hello. Good morning. Which mic is working? I don't know.
Both are working.
Both are working. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, and thank you again for coming, despite the rain and everything. Actually, I would like to start from where Hala just stopped by saying we are not Iran. The taxi driver who drove me from airport last night, he was an Iranian. And once he knew that I'm an Egyptian, he kept blaming me. Why you elected this man? Why you elected the Muslim Brotherhood? You're just repeating what Iran has done. You're repeating our mistake. And I told him, we're not Iran, and we're not Saudi Arabia. We are Egypt. It's different. It's 6,000 years of culture, and no one will be able to break it. But he insisted that there is a danger in this. Actually, starting from here, it's right. The rise of Islamists who are thinking actually in a way that is not fair enough for, or political Islamists to be particular, that do not think highly of women, is a big risk for women's rights in Egypt. But actually, the women's rights issue in Egypt is not new, it's more complicated than only saying that the Islamists will undermine women's rights in Egypt. Actually, before the revolution, we did not have the luxury of, having proper women's rights in the country. We always had problems. Although we had the first lady very interested in promoting women's rights values, empowering women, especially economically, in the grassroots, and she really did a great job. Suzanne Mubarak, it's right, she was the wife of the dictator, and but still, she did a great job on that level. Actually, she helped empower a lot of women. But the thing, and she helped also change many laws in favor of women. But the thing is that our culture did not accept to give her the opportunity, or give the women's rights movement in Egypt the opportunity to enforce these laws on the grassroots people. For example, in the past 10 years, we had two great laws that I think helped us to be more advanced than other Arab countries in terms with women's rights. The first was the Khula law, and the other one was the nationality law. A woman can pass her nationality to her children. Before, we didn't have this advantage. And also the Khula law, it allows a woman to divorce herself from her husband if she doesn't like to live with him anymore. These two laws were actually like a savior for so many women who have been suffering from the way they were treated in their houses, and domestic violence, and actually complicated issues with marriage. But see how many women took advantage of this law, how many women were willing to change their status quo. This was on the legal level. On the political level, we also had great laws in favor of women that helped them or encouraged them to run for parliament, to run for different offices. But how many women were willing to run? And even the type of women who were allowed to be hired by the president or the first lady in parliament and different offices, they were only certain group of women who are friends with the first lady, and who are maybe members or friends of the NDP, the National Democratic Party. They were not the independent women, the young women. There were no clear strategy of empowering the young generation of women who actually found themselves or found their way with the civil society groups. Independent groups, I was one of them. I went to work with civil society. My passion for women's rights, I couldn't do it through governmental channels because, again, it was close to a certain number of people. And thus, we were able to make a parallel movement to the governmental movement, and this movement played an essential role for sure in making the 2011 revolution. Speaking about the 2011 revolution, I think actually those few days were like heaven in Egypt. Everything was just perfect. No sectarian tension, no women are marginalized, no problems at all. Everything was just perfect. Nobody asks who you are, or why you're wearing a scarf or not, why you're wearing a cross or in your chain or not. Actually, people knew what it means to be an Egyptian and only an Egyptian. But soon after, everything just returned to be even worse from before. So I don't really believe that women are being marginalized now. They have been always marginalized. Always, the culture are marginalizing them, the laws, everything, even the constitution. Now we are blaming Islamists, for example, for writing this strange constitution, and they want to put things like they want girls to get married from the age of 9, and they want FGM to be legalized. Those are the biggest debates now in Egypt, can you believe, regarding women's rights. And we are speaking now after a revolution. So actually, it's true. They are doing a lot of mistakes, but actually the culture of the society is helping them or giving them the legitimacy to do what they are doing. So I believe it's very important to work on laws, to work on improving the constitution, but in parallel, we need also to work on the grassroots mentality to help people understand that democratization cannot happen without women. I gave the title of my paper that may be distributed on your published at the newsletter. Yeah, it's no spring without flowers, meaning that this is a fact. We cannot expect that the Arab Spring would happen without the flowers of the Arab Spring being there, without the women being there. We are an essential part of the whole process from the beginning, and we need to continue. But also, I would like to refer that, or to blame somehow, those who name themselves liberal in my country. I used to work with a political party, and actually I helped it founded in the year 2011, just 1 month after the revolution, and it was all youth party, and we came like with much ambition. We want to change the political scene in Egypt. We want to prove that politics can include everyone, and we will do miracles and so on. But what happened is that once it came to women's rights, they started again to show me the bad face, or the ugly face of the patriarchal mentality. I ran for parliament by the end of 2011, and at the beginning, the plan was to have me on the top of the list. And then, a few weeks after, the leadership of the party, and actually I was part of the steering committee of the party, they came to me and said, you have to understand this, and you have to sacrifice for your party. The people will not accept to see a woman on the top of the list. A list in Egypt is the ticket, the electoral ticket. The people will not accept to see a woman on the top of the ticket, so it's better to put a man and you come next. Actually, I tried to struggle and say, no, it's not acceptable, but at the end of the day, it's an experience. Let's try, let's see. And somehow they convinced me that I should go with the mentality of the people rather than challenging the mentality of the people. And I think I did a big mistake by saying, yes, I accept to be number 2. What happened then is that actually the person they put at the first, he was very weak, he was not known at all, he was not popular, and he did not have the qualifications that would encourage the people to vote for our ticket. And the party, instead of like equally distributing the money or the funds for the electoral campaigns on equally on different tickets, actually they chose to distribute more money on the tickets that has male on the top, or that had the males on the top. So, and by the way, I'm speaking about a liberal party, a young party that is made by revolutionaries, and everyone, like, you know, we had very high hopes. We were together in Tahrir Square just a few months before that, but once it came to politics, they forgot everything. So I believe it's important in the next steps that women do not depend on anyone, not depend on the government to change their status quo, not depend on even their own political parties or their own groups or their own organizations. They should start a new movement together to look for the future of the women, not only in Egypt, by the way, I'm speaking also about the Arab world. Our fate is very related, and we can really empower each other very well. And this does not mean we will go against men. That's not the case, but we will need to have our own space, just side by side with them, to prove that we can make it. Actually, I will not consider the Arab Spring, or at least Egypt's spring has succeeded, or we already have a spring, until I see a woman president of a state, or a woman who can run as president and be there. So we have a lot of challenges ahead. Islamists from one side, the culture from the other side, and the constitution and all these issues. But I think we need to work hard on this to promote liberal values in the country more and more, to establish liberal democracy where institutionalism, constitutionalism is the main pillars of the state, and not just a certain president or a certain group, and again to unite as Arab women in the Arab Spring, to make sure that the spring will be a flowery one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dalia. You set a wonderful precedent, 10 minutes on the dot. Omezzine, follow the example, please, 10 minutes. Omezzine is from Tunisia.
Thank you, Haleh. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the center for inviting me to talk about what's happening in Tunisia. As Dalia, yesterday I went with a taxi cab that was from Iran too. And when he learned that I was from Tunisia, he said, "Oh, when I was a diplomat with the Shah, I met with Habib Bourguiba, our first, yes." And I know that he was a very good man, and he has advanced women's in Tunisia. And I just realized that the image of Tunisia abroad is definitely that we have a very advanced situation, and maybe I am the product of the politics that he used at that time in 1956. Before our first constitution, after our independence, we had the personal status code that allowed women to be almost as equal as men in terms of law. Today, I thank you for allowing me to talk about women after Arab awakening from the Tunisian ground. I would like to focus on the political ground, and I would like to try to answer two questions. How is women's role evolving in the political scene, and how are they contributing to the transitional process? And maybe I will give a personal view on how women marginalized in Tunisia at the end of the process. So before starting, I would like to give you an overview of the political context in my country. So we are almost 1 year after our first democratic elections. We have a National Constituent Assembly, which main role is to write a new constitution. We are also, after 10 months of the first governing coalition that was elected, and which job was to bring peace in the country and allow the National Constituent Assembly to write the constitution, but also has a challenge to provide safety and security for citizens, create jobs in economic crisis, global economic crisis, and also launch the transitional process of transitional justice to make people that are responsible under dictatorship accountable for what they did. So now that you have the political context and that you can know also that there are some parties that are calling for the end of legitimacy of the National Constituent Assembly in the 23rd of October, which is a threat actually to the political stability that we have since 1 year, you can try to imagine the role of women that are involved in politics, taking care of maybe all these subjects at one time, and also fighting for women's equality and parity. You can imagine also how many times they have been told that women's rights and women's equality and equality between men and women are not the priority, that the revolution was made for creating jobs, for fighting poverty, for providing liberties, but women's rights should come at the bottom of the list. But that's not what's happening. Women that are in politics took the women and men equality as the top of their priority. These women, you should understand, are normally, the major part, are ordinary women. They have been brought to the top because we had a very progressive law in the first elections that imposed parity for all the lists, which means that you had to have every party or every independent list had to have half of its candidates women, and also employing a zebra system, which means that if you had the top of the list who is a man, the second is a woman, and then the third a man, or a woman isn't, when a woman, which is very, very rare, at top of the list, and the second is a man, etc. So ordinary women went to politics, and so that they have very big difficulties imposing themselves and talking about their problems in a very macho and misogynist society. So I'm going back now to their political role. In the Constituent Assembly, men are not absent from the process. On contrary, they prove to be precious allies when they are progressists and human rights defenders. But women have shown a presence of all moments in the committees. They have been vigilant and especially reactive when they detected threats to our rights and regression risks. Since the beginning of the constitution writing process, we have passed through many constitutional perils, such as having Sharia as a unique source of law, or the absence of reference to human rights and fundamental liberties, and absence of reference also to international conventions in the preamble of the Constitution. But maybe the most serious and directly linked to women's rights, and Hala, you talked about it earlier, the new concept of men and women complementing each other instead of being equal. So these battles are very recent, and we will still cannot say that they are won, and because the Constitution is still on draft. Today, all the committees have ended their work, and now they have passed the draft of the Constitution to a special committee that is going to write the final version of it. And hopefully, the head of the Constitution is the President of the National Constituent Assembly, who is a women's rights and human rights defender since almost 40 years. The most important for me is that we succeeded to unmask all these perils. Women representatives played a major role in declaring war to regression risk terms and concepts. And the example of complementarity of gender instead of equality is a good one. And I can talk about the first woman, Salma Mabrouk Saada, who is a member of the Committee of Rights and Liberties, who raised the alarm when she saw that she could not stop the voting process that was going on in her committee. And wrote, the first thing she did was to write a Facebook status and to denounce this. And you know, Facebook is very important in Tunisia. It's even the first source of information before the media, the official media sometimes. So she put that on her Facebook status, and then we shared, when I say we, all her fans, and Facebook it's fans who follow, like a page. So we shared her status, and then the online websites took her status, interviewed her, and then we had also the international media following that also wrote articles. So all political parties were obliged to take a position on that subject, and we had, I think, the climax of the people being aware of that was the 13th of August, which is also a second Women's Day, apart from the 8th of March in Tunisia, which is the feast of the code of the personal status code. It's the anniversary of personal status code. So we had all political parties and civil society going on protest in the street to say we want equality and not complementarity. So this was very important. Today, we are, thanks to that, we are back to the preamble version of the Constitution of Equality between citizens in front of the law, which is, according to progressist public opinion, a very good step. But if we see the big picture and we remember the suspended Constitution of 1959, we realize that we are on the same point as before. So all citizens are equal in front of the law, which is not a regression, but not a progression either. And also experts say that you are going to go back to the same old situation where you had the personal status code, which is unequal to women when it is linked to marriage, divorce, inheritance, and managing family affairs. So when you say that all citizens are equal in front of the law and you allow the law to be unequal, you didn't close the door to inequality. So now the public opinion is happy. But we still are optimistic because we are still writing the draft and it's not finished. So maybe we will close the door to inequality. Also, I would like to show the importance of women in concrete involvement and participation in preserving what we have gained and fight for genuine equality in law. But their position in the decision-making process was not granted, especially with our manly society and macho mentality. It is thanks to the parity I talked about earlier. And the parity also was a fight. And I remember when we was on a revolution, we were, as you said, Dalia, men and women all together. There was no problem. We were all united because we had the same target, to fight the dictatorship, and just there was no any kind of discussion. But then when I brought the petition to say, okay, now we would like to have the women participation in the political life as granted, why don't you sign with me this petition and we are a group and we can lobby for it, etc. There was a big discussion and even women were against that. So I heard many arguments such as, okay, women, we have not enough women in Tunisia. Why parity? Is it admitting that women are weak and they cannot succeed to be in politics? Why are you fighting for that? It's not priority. And we were divided. So I was the only one who went to old NGOs who were defending women's rights and human rights who signed for it. So elder people signed for that, but younger were not aware of it and said, okay, women, you have all what you want. Why are you asking for this? So parity, because we had strong NGOs and strong lobbies amongst the power, and at that time we had a transitional instance, parity passed. And we have, among 10,000 candidates, we had almost 5,000 women candidates. And also, today we have 27% of the National Constituent Assembly who is composed by women. And that's why they can be there and raise alarms when it is linked to regressions on women's rights. But in Tunisia, we had this chance to have parity. And we saw also that the political party were not wanting to put women on the top of the list because only 7% of lists were headed by women. But thanks to the vertical parity, at least we have this 27%. But there were no horizontal parity, so they did not impose to have half of the list headed by women and half of the list headed by men. So it is maybe certainly something that we can advance for next electoral laws, but it's something that we gained after revolution, the parity. So, as I said, in my country we had the parity which brought women to decision-making positions and to fight for equality. But today the question is, okay, if we succeed to have equality and we forget about parity, who is going to be in the next positions and to fight for women's rights and continue? Because when we gain something, we can lose it. And so I'm going to conclude on that. I'm sorry for being too long. The fight is still ongoing, but what's very important for me is that we moved from feminism state, state feminism, to political feminism. So women are aware, even if they were not feminists before entering into politics, they are aware that they should fight for themselves. That's the most important. Thank you.
Very much, Omezzine. We will move to Rihab You have a PowerPoint or no?
No, I
No.
decided to
Would you like to sit and speak from here or go?
sit if that's okay.
Oh, sure, it's okay.
Do I need to turn my?
Yeah,
okay,
you
great.
you
Somebody
have
turned it
yeah.
on.
Just
Okay.
feel free and comfortable any way you want.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm gonna sit. Makes me less nervous. And also, I tried to cover. I know a lot of people don't hear from Libya, so I tried to cover the socio-cultural view, as well as the political and economic. And if you have any questions about any specific, please feel free to ask.
We will leave the questions
At the end,
to
exactly.
yes, at the end.
Okay. So, and I'm going to read directly just to keep it concise. While political aspirations remain very delicately chartered territory, Libyan women are whetting their appetites with new careers and business ventures post-Arab awakening. Having firmly planted their feet in public life through Libya's burgeoning civil society, women are seeking more access and influence, yet they have been increasingly more marginalized in public spaces and through social norms. Although the transitional governments have thus far not moved to limit the participation or progress of women in Libya, very little has been done to protect women and promote their participation in any sector. Likewise, many Libyan women themselves seem to be ambivalent about empowerment, vacillating between resignation to what they perceive as inflexible patriarchal values despite the revolution and the hope and desire for more freedoms and a richer life. Socio-cultural view. Just as they did through the revolution, Libyan women are leading again by building Libya's brand new civil society and for all causes, from environmental protection to human rights advocacy and reconciliation. You may know the work of these brave women if you've heard of the protests last week in Benghazi, where over 30,000 people came out to demand the immediate disarmament of all non-state actors, particularly extremist militias like the ones that likely murdered Ambassador Chris Stevens. The wave of unarmed protests ultimately prompted the Libyan government to begin its arms collection program a few days ago. This is just one of many examples of the countless ways that women are behind real and positive change in Libya today. Despite the undeniable contribution of women to Libya's revolution and civil society, a cornerstone of democracy, women are being increasingly marginalized in social and public life. This marginalization is not likely to due to a subversive plot to keep women oppressed, but rather a default return to post-revolution cultural and social norms that were severely deformed by tyranny, which has always been cruelest to Libyan women. Among the socio-cultural threats are a deteriorating security situation, incessant harassment in public places, and a culture of segregation, all of which threaten to isolate women again, and this time from genuine participation in democracy. Security. Today, illegal arrests, detentions, and abductions are a great threat to both men and women in Libya. Despite government attempts to co-opt armed militias, they often follow their own protocol, and nearly no one and nothing can hold them accountable. One such incident occurred on August 9th in Benghazi during a workshop on the participation of women in the Libyan Constitution Drafting Committee. An armed militia raided the meeting and held participants captive without cause. After hours of negotiations, the militia released some participants but detained 2 women for nearly 1 week. In a public statement, the head of the government-run Civil Society Support Center, Dalia Ziada, referred to witnessing the detention of a female activist by saying, "I can say with all confidence and certainty that the manner in which she was arrested was a clear violation of her civil liberties as a citizen and of the dignity which should be granted to civil servants." The women have been released, and the GNC has yet to issue a single statement regarding this incident. Aside from the security situation, Libya has a serious sexual harassment problem. Women are incessantly harassed in public places. Oftentimes, they are followed and intimidated physically, left with no option but to swallow their pride or stay at home. The harassment of women in public spaces has gone entirely unaddressed. In fact, oftentimes, this public form of humiliation is actually perpetrated and upheld by the people that aspire to lead us. One very high-profile example of this was during the nationally televised transfer of powers ceremony from the National Transitional Council to the GNC, Libya's newly elected body. During the ceremony, Representative Salahuddin al-Badi was disturbed by the young and unveiled moderator. 10 minutes into the program, he stood from his seat and shouted, "Cover your head." When the moderator refused to obey, Badi exited the program in an apparent protest. The president of the NTC then proceeded to gesture with his hand for the young lady to exit the stage, presumably out of respect for the now upset Representative Badi. She was swiftly replaced, and Abdel Jalil then began his speech with, "We respect freedoms and individual rights, but you must understand that we have our culture and our religion." His comments received applause. While the president respected Badi's rights to the freedom of expression and protest, he denied the young moderator's right to the same freedoms and spared her no respect or dignity in the process. In an interview that evening, Badi commented, "She should have known better than to come today. They want to make us look like we have no heritage, that we've come from the streets." The incident, which impacts both cultural norms and the status and perception of women, was never officially addressed by our newly elected government, keeping the culture of women's public humiliation and degradation unchallenged, indeed perhaps even encouraging it. These two incidents gave rise to a boiling point among women's rights activists, bringing them together to create the Coalition for Libyan Women's Rights. The coalition prepared a letter of concern to the GNC, requesting a statement of position on the two incidents, but unfortunately, the day the letter was issued, extremists began an operation to raid the tombs of Sufi sheikhs and demolish the mosques they were in. The women activists mobilized to protect the sites, and the GNC has since become nearly entirely occupied with the ever-increasing security threats, including the murder of Ambassador Chris Stevens and the initiative to disarm militias and establish a Libyan police force and army. The letter of concern has yet to be addressed. Segregation. Another challenge for women in public spaces is the very common cultural practice of gender segregation in Libya. Whether one is in a private or a public space, they will almost always be segregated by gender. Segregation puts well-educated and empowered women at a disadvantage when they seek to break into typically male-dominated economic and political spheres. Likewise, the general isolation of women from the public spheres prevents women from interacting with other women. This isolation spells doom for any woman seeking positions of greater leadership. For example, when Libyan women ran for office, very few men actually knew them because it's culturally inappropriate for them to be in the same space as men. Moreover, they had very little opportunity to interact with women they didn't already know because Libyan women socialize in small, familiar circles in each other's homes. There are some exceptions to this, but on the whole, the segregation of genders has caused women to suffer from insufficient public interaction and the enrichment opportunities that follow. Some, like the country's mufti, are calling for greater segregation of males and females in education and in the public sphere. Needless to say, this will further isolate women and deny them access to critical new opportunities. Furthermore, through decades of research on segregated societies, we know that segregation naturally breeds inequality. The bottom line is, until Libya's spaces are converted into environments that afford women safety, dignity, and equal access, women's progress and empowerment will remain rhetoric that gives rise to token policies. The economic view. Due to the naturally competitive nature of employment, Libyan women tend to do better in this sector than any other. Being, on average, better educated and more disciplined than their male counterparts, Libyan women are often sought after by companies and international nonprofits, which offer greater salaries than the public sector. In addition, Libyans still value the traditional role of males as the sole breadwinner. Thus, women often enjoy dispensing of their salaries as they please. Libya's economy is still closer to that of a socialist than a free market economy. Thus, consumption is low, and working women are among the many who enjoy a significant savings. Despite many women making good strides in the workplace, there are still many who are burdened by socio-cultural realities, some of which are the lack of support or services for working mothers, like babysitting after-school programs or school bus rides, or husbands willing to share chores at home. Social and cultural duties for women from collectivist cultures are expected to take priority. Libyan men too struggle for professional success in Libya, many of whom seek to establish themselves before supporting the women around them. Disempowering interpretation of Islamic traditions, often used as tools to keep women at home or female-dominated careers, such as nursing or teaching. Hostility in public spheres, such as harassment and poor security, discourage women and their loved ones from letting them venture out. The romanticized idea in Bedouin culture that an honorable man's wife or daughter remains strictly at home with few exceptions, like education or family duties. And of course, businesswomen seeking to venture into non-female clientele-based businesses experience challenges in breaking into traditionally male-dominated networks and inner circles of business owners and government contractors. In addition, Libya's education and training institutions have extremely limited capacity. Women seeking to enhance their employability by developing a new language or technical skill must contend with few education programs and very high tuition fees relative to the average household income of $500 a month. 3 founders of the recently registered Raidat Business Women's Council are already seeking to create solutions to these challenges with their new businesses, respectively in IT training, HR recruitment services, and a state-of-the-art day and evening childcare center. As more women venture into professional roles and launch businesses, they reinforce the need to invest in working women for both economic growth and capacity building. The political view. There are 120 seats for independent candidates in Libya's General National Assembly. After free and fair elections, the Libyan people elected 119 men and 1 woman. Initially, one might think that women are being intentionally excluded from the process. However, a closer look reveals that of the 1,800 self-nominated, less than 4% were women. This suggests that the lack of representation is due to hesitance to self-nominate. This may be due to the following socio-cultural obstacles in addition to those previously mentioned. There is a strong stigma around women in politics that remains from the Gaddafi charade of women's empowerment, during which many women were appointed to positions of high rank and titles in exchange for insidious displays of loyalty, sexual favors, and/or consolation for being raped. The lack of confidence in themselves take on major leadership roles, and by virtue of projection, lack of confidence in other women seeking to do the same. There are virtually no role models which challenge the pervasive mentality that women do not belong or cannot succeed in non-traditional roles or political roles. And of course, there is the fear of social stigmas and gossip that may ensue when a woman ventures into new, scary, and uncharted territory. In addition, a few lawless individuals seeking to enforce their oppressive views of religion have embarked on a mission to desecrate faces of women candidates on their advertisement banners. The offenders have been videotaped by private citizens. However, it does not appear any efforts have been made by the state to capture them. One attempt to oppress political aspirations of women in Libya turned deadly last May when the radical militia leaders shot and killed a woman, now simply known as Mrs. Shteta, after having mistakenly believed she was running for office. The suspected murderer, known as Al-Qawma, who is also believed to have been behind the murder of Ambassador Chris Stevens, remains free, and there appears to have been no investigation into the death of Mrs. Shteta. The good news is, despite the fact that 1 woman was elected for a seat of the GNC, Libya enjoys the participation of 32 women's candidates via its political party seats, making the total number of women in parliament roughly 15%. This is thanks to a zipper list policy and women activists put forth and the transitional government put into effect. The indication is that, in general, Libyans are open to the participation of women in politics, but little to nothing has been done to create an environment that genuinely fosters political empowerment of women. Indeed, the deafening silence of our female GNC members, the government members, on several incidents which have violated the basic rights and dignity of Libyan women suggests that although many women have made it into the GNC, very few have begun to lead. As the Libyan government focuses on its current priorities of security and order, women's empowerment does not have to take a back seat. Simple protection policies can ensure that the basic civil liberties and dignity of women are upheld, and strong public statements from our political leaders can dissuade those seeking to debilitate the progress of women. Libyans at large must acknowledge the great significance and value of women's contribution in a developing nation. And finally, and most importantly, women themselves must choose to support one another and together take what is rightfully theirs.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Really very rare that we get a speaker from Libya, and thank you for the overview. It was fascinating. Fahmia, please. Fahmia is from Yemen.
Yes.
Oh yeah, PowerPoint. Mona.
Yes, the presentation.
Mona is coming.
Okay.
She'll fix it. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for very much for having me today, and it is a pleasure to speak here after our president was here just 3 days ago, and he had spoken in this place. My presentation is very short with some pictures. Sorry.
Mona, maybe you stay there.
This picture is one of the change squares in Yemen, particularly in Taiz city, and it has some of women activists who were from the beginning in the revolution or in the uprising. This is the outline of the presentation. I'm going to just briefly give you a background about the women, the Yemeni society composition of women. It is not just one kind of women, and also women participation, perceptions in the Arab Spring. It has been different and varied. Women after Spring and in transitional period, as we are living at the moment. Efforts by international community and also by the Yemeni government to enhance women participation, and then we will look to the future. I think you know these pictures, and I think it summarizes everything in Yemen. About from this picture, you can see women is there, but she's not there. From the very beginning, women has started alongside with the men to change squares in different cities, they were veiled, and it was the first time for Yemeni women to go into street in that visible way. I mean, in my life, I haven't seen such a gathering, a huge million gathering in Yemen. Men and women in public sphere, and that is not known in a very men-dominated society and environment. However, I have some conservations about the participation of women in the beginning of the uprising. Yes, women were there. Maybe liberal women, yes, they went out into the street by their will because they are educated and aware, and most of them are independent. However, I was really surprised to see the huge number of women from Islamist party. They were hundreds, they were thousands, and they are living in one. Unlike the liberal ones, for example, liberal can choose, where to go. They have their own point of views. Unfortunately, I was very sad to see some herds of women are mobilized as to the preference or the willingness of their party, particularly Islamist party. So it was very obvious. It has been from the very beginning, the unique participation of women, and women has been for a long time a political ticket, a political card in the hands of the politicians in Yemen. And it has been like that even in the uprising and in the Arab awakening. And if it is, Yemen has I have some comments on not using sparing. It's not sparing for women. It's not sparing, and it is not flowery. So, women were or have been exploited harshly by both. The women who were with the ex-regime and also the women who were with the revolutionaries on the streets. Yes, from the very beginning, Tawakkol Karman, the Nobel Prize holder, she was detained by the ex-regime, and it was a huge scandal in Yemen because women, yes, they are invisible and they cannot, in the same time, they are not touchable. So it was a huge scandal for the government and the ex-regime. During the uprising, women, the ex-regime has realized the importance of women in helping.
Your panel,
yes,
let
in
each
advance.
of them make their presentation too.
So they have realized the importance of women participation. So they have started to actually to attack women. And we have heard about many incidents about kidnapping women from the change squares, the female doctors. Even some women in change squares were killed among men. And it was really a huge and a new phenomenon in Yemen. There was a very obvious example of defaming the women who were participating in the change square by the ex-regime because they were together with men day and night. So they say it is about mixing. They were talking from a religious point of view, and what they were doing was against the Islam, and it was a huge slap from the ex-regime, and they were, many slaps from both sides, and women had to go through these really ups and downs. And many examples, these just very small examples. So the bright example from the uprising, I think it's a good example, a bright example, not just for Yemeni women, but for all the women in the region. Tawakkol Karman from the very beginning was, was a bright example who has participated, extensively in uprising, in the local level, regional, international. She's like an icon now. But women are really, at the time being, women are criticizing Tawakkol Karman because she is politically active, and they want her to promote and to work a lot towards advancing women's rights in Yemen. There are some controversies here about her role. This is some pictures for the women. The women are really liberal. They don't actually they don't adhere to the dress code in Yemen, the black abaya and everything, and they are really they were really participating with their men. They were in the streets, and they were different from the women below. Those women, there was a big incident in the squares that they have built a partition between men and women, and those women they actually went against this partition. So they were beaten down, and their cameras, mobiles were confiscated by the revolutionary guards, and it was a big scandal. Since that incident, it was a turning point for many liberal women who detached themselves from participating in those mobilized protests. So women after spring, after elections in 21st of February 2012, there was some optimism by choosing 3 ladies in the new government, in the current government, 2 ministers, Minister of Human Rights and Minister of Social Affairs, and 1 lady in the Prime Minister's office. So it was a good beginning, but those, however, those ministries are always, even in the ex-regime, have been set up or have been chosen for women. In another step, it was in communication or contact committee. That committee was responsible for having a dialogue with the political actors in Yemen. They have to go to all the parties and convince them. Al-Houthis in the north, and also the secessionist or the Southern movement in the south, and the Houthis in the north, and also with the young people, with women, with all, and with the political parties. We have different political parties. So it was a huge and a tough task for communication committee, and there was a lady in the members of the communication committee, Nadia Saqaf, who is the editor-chief of Yemen Times, the English newspaper. And at the moment, we have a technical committee. It contains 6 women out of 30 members. And it was actually, it wasn't up to our aspirations or women aspirations, because we were looking for 30% minimum of women participation in this technical committee. It is very important committee, by the way. They are preparing for the national dialogue that is going to be in the end of this 2012. And upon holding the national dialogue, we are going to have a new constitution. We are going to rewrite our constitution in the new Yemen, trying to contain all these different actors in the ground. Jamal bin Omar is the UN envoy in Yemen. We sat with him and we were complaining from the very beginning in Gulf Cooperation GCC convention. There was in the beginning draft, there was no word or there was no clue about or hint about women participations, and there was a pushing from the international committee and many parts to include women participation, but so far even the GCC states that women participation is a part of New Yemen. When we sat with Jamal bin Omar, he said like this: political parties in Yemen disagree on everything. They cannot agree with each other. They don't get along with each other, but they agree only on one thing: is marginalized or sideline women, and it is very obvious. Now the technical committee has raised some issues to the President Hadi to be included in the national dialogue. 8 issues. One of these issues is women. I'm going just to go quickly about women who have gone through a difficult times or who have been attacked during or after Arab Spring, even until now. Arwa Uthman, she is one of the artists and activists in Yemen, a writer, and she was in the previous picture, who was beaten and her camera was confiscated because she doesn't adhere to the dress code. She's she's outspoken, and she's always criticizes Islamists on her Facebook. In the beginning of 2012, this women page on the Facebook has been blocked because Islamists gathered their voices to the Facebook management and they blocked her page, and she has to open a new account. I think maybe you have heard about Bushra Al-Makhtari from Change Square. She's actually in a daily, she's living in a daily danger, and she is being threatened every day almost by the Islamists because she's a liberal woman, and she has written a very powerful piece when she talked about God and about her, but there was a fatwa issued by religious people who says explicitly that her death is a ticket for heaven. And she has, she's a very strong woman. Women, those who were along with her in the beginning of revelations, especially from the Islamists, actually have beaten her in the Change Square. Some of those women, it was very strange when women attack women, and it's really sad. And her story, needs to really to be considered. We have Amal Al-Basha, who is a member now in the technical committee I told you, and who is preparing for the national dialogue. This woman for ages has been a women rights activist and promoting for women rights, and she's the head of Sister Arab Forum for Human Rights. And of course, Islamists, don't like her at all. And when she was chosen for the technical committee, there was a fatwa from the religious scholars in Yemen state that, is Yemen empty from men to have or to choose Amal al-Basha? Muhammad al-Hazmi is one of those scholars. He attacked her harshly, and he said, very clearly, Amal doesn't represent Yemeni women. Also, Huriya Mashhour, who was in the revolution and who was appointed as the Ministry of Human Rights, she submitted a report to Human Rights Commission, and she asked for to take the immunity from the ex-president, and she was harshly attacked by the ex-regime media outlets, as they say she is promoting for gay people, she is promoting to canceling the Quranic teaching and others. So it's I don't see really the future of women in Yemen is still blurry, and many challenges are ahead. With considering a majority of women population in Yemen is still in rural areas, more than 70% of women are illiterate. How come? We educated women, elite, upper class, middle class, we are still few, and I don't think so. We represent all this majority of women, to be honest. And even those women who are now in the transitional period, I don't think so. They represent those all women. Humanitarian crisis in Yemen is a big challenge, and women are part of this humanitarian crisis, either in the north or in the south. So if you go to the camps, you will see how vulnerable women are. They are looking just for food and security, and they, having women in power is not in their agenda, is not in their heads yet. This is from the last, Oxfam has released a report just in September, in the late of September this month. It says that 4 out of 5 Yemeni women claim their lives have worsened over the past 12 months. So it is very true, and food and security and jobs are their priorities. So if there are answering the questions, are women marginalized after the Arab awakening? Yes, as Dalia said in the beginning, women have been marginalized along the time, and I think just our life, women life have been just become worse and worse at the same time. At the current time. So it's I have a lot to say, but time is really a concern. Thank you.
President Hadi, the president of Yemen, was here speaking at the Wilson Center last week, and when he was asked about women's representation, he kept on saying that, well, because of the GCC agreement they signed, so there would be a representation of 26%, while the GCC says 30%. I don't know why he decided that somehow to settle for 26%. So he repeated it a couple of times. You may want to take a transcript of that speech and show it to him. That is what he said. After the thing. Hala Al Dosari, you want to go there? Okay. Yeah, from Saudi Arabia. You see the diversity of group that we have managed to put together for you today.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the Wilson Center for having us and keeping us visible. And this chance, the Arab Awakening, I think this is the main signal that we are visible. And really, if it does nothing but highlight the light and highlight the struggle of the women in the region, I think we have done a success and we're flowering. And in Saudi Arabia, I know I'm perfectly situated at the end after Egypt, Tunisia, and I think there is not much happening in Saudi Arabia for the outside world. We didn't have a revolution, but we did join the revolutions in the other countries by observation and by learning. For Saudi women, I would like to choose certain stories. Some of them are personal stories, and some of them are stories for other women from Saudi. And I think it would tell a lot about the impact the Arab awakening has had on us as women and as people. The first story, for those who are familiar with the setup and the mindset of the Saudi people, they would definitely realize that in gender segregated society, where women not only conform to the social norms, to the political authority, to the religious authority, it's quite really rare for women to question and challenge authorities. Earlier this year, earlier this year, we had a woman uploading a video on YouTube of herself challenging a religious authority man, one of the moral police members who roams the markets and the malls and the public places to observe how women are dressed and behave. So obviously this woman has been confronted by one of the members, and he has seen that she's wearing a nail polish and she's wearing a lipstick. So he decided to ask the woman to leave the mall because her general aura is conductive to sin or fitna. Fitna is seductive. Yeah. So the woman decided to set her ground and not to leave, and she's a young woman. And she's been questioning him and quoting statements. She studied well, and she quoted statements from the chief of the religious police, stating that the members of the religious police should not ever follow through. They would just, state an opinion or an advice to someone, but they should not ask people or harass people, ask them to leave or do any detention. So she's been saying those statements to the religious police, and the religious police says, I'm not going, I'm staying right here. And she said, okay, I'm staying right here too, and you are on video, and I'm uploading now it on Twitter and on YouTube, and Al-Sheikh, he's going to be asking you about it tomorrow. Of course, he called in the police, the security forces, and the security forces handed their backs to the woman, and they were telling her that he's a man who's doing his duty. And of course, the man believed, the religious man, he believed that he's doing his duty. He's been hired and he's been giving money to observe women. So did he go wrong? He just saw a woman who is not adherent to the dress code, and his duty and obligation to tell her to go out or to cover up. And the religious police was, of course, supported by the soldiers in asking her to leave. And she didn't take it. She said that she actually argued with the security officers and telling them, I cannot just leave. If I left, maybe they will follow me and they will harass me on my car, and I cannot guarantee my safety. You have to report now a harassment report. You have to take my case as an harassment. The police did not take her case, of course, and eventually she left the market and she went home and she became a celebrity. And the chief of the religious police issued a statement apologizing for the action of this man. Of course, it was a very modest apology, and some of the blame was, of course, given to that woman for challenging and for creating a mess out of a big thing. And this story, although it's of an anonymous woman, if it's a young woman who is not one of the affluent women, but it shows the impact of empowerment, entitlement, the sense of emboldening that happened to women once they are part of the big picture in the Arab region, that we are entitled, we should fight for what we think is right, even if it's within a very modest and single-handed way. The second story that I want to share is the story of the Women to Drive. And I think most of you are familiar with that. And the Women to Drive actually campaign started in 1990, but because of the harsh reactions received by the women who actually tried to enact the change, nothing happened. Those women were dormant, and every movement decided not to frankly confront the government. Instead, they were trying to work through petitions and requests for reforms, and through writings in the media. And nothing happened until Manal Sharif decided to videotape herself and go online. At the time, we were working with some activists to issue a letter to the Shura Council. The Shura Council is an advisory council to the king, and they don't have much of an authority to enact anything, but they do have a role in advising the Council of Ministers on what to do. What happened is a group of activists. I was one of them. Were writing a petition to the Shura Council. It was the third petition on Raw about women to drive. And then Manal al-Sharif drove her car, and it became more widely known. What I got in the petition, this is a very different strategy, is that we shouldn't announce it. We shouldn't tell people that we are actually trying to reach the Shura Council to allow women to drive, because that's the most non-confrontational, government alliance way to enact a change. But then came Manal al-Sharif, and she asked me to write an open letter to the king, which I did. And then everything went to spiral. Of course, she was detained and arrested. We had to go public. We had to be on TV, and most of the other women, they had to be on TV and issue statement, mobilize the media, the local and the international pressure, just to get her out of the prison. And of course, some of the activists now, they analyze the whole step as she drove her car a little bit earlier than 17th of June. If she had have waited to 17th of June, maybe the government would have given up. And this type of attitude is very common because we live in a very obscure situation. We don't know exactly how the decision making is made. We're not sure of what are the right policies, what are the right strategies to do. And if some activists are viciously attacked or aggressively harassed, the others would go down. The others would feel that there is no point, exactly as what you have mentioned a while ago. But for me, I think it raises the bar. It raises the bar because, as we have seen, none of the other drivers have been arrested or detained. And itself, it tells us a message that maybe the beginning of anything is thorny, it's difficult, but then it goes on a more, you can't reach more peaks than that. It would go to a plateau eventually. I want to tell a story of everybody who follows the social network would note that the Saudis have invaded actually Twitter and Facebook. We were following the revolutions in other countries, and we've been using the connections. And actually, I'm a friend to so many activists online. I was very pleased to meet Dalia at the end. I've read about them, and I'm inspired by their actions. And I think for most of us, it's a learning process. We're actually learning. We're quoting the statements mentioned by them, and we are making a comparison in our situation. For us, there is actually limited participation for people in decision making in official media. So shortly after the beginning of the Arab Awakening or the revolutions, a group of journalists, mostly young, they decided to have a website called Al-Maqal for the other opinions, which is an article or essay written by the other side of journalists, because most of the media outlets are owned by the government or royal members of the government, and the limit of speech or free speech is way too limited. So we wanted people to, I wasn't one of the founders, but the founders have actually created a venue which you can read about the Saudi society, about the analysis which you will never be able to read in official media. It actually did not have anything left without commenting. So it's a very wealthy source of information for observers. What happened is, I will talk about a story that is quite personal. Nahda Youth Forum is a conference that is organized by an independent group. At the beginning, they sought the help from one of the major popular Islamic scholar, Sheikh Salman Al-Ouda, as a sponsor. He is, in effect, not involved in the organization selection of speakers or of the candidates to attend. And the idea of the conference was that in every year, they will hold the conference in one place, and they will invite about 200 to 400 youth. Half of them are females, and they will introduce them to emerging analysis and commentary on the regional public and political ideologies. The idea is if we empower those men and women by personal interactions with intellectual leaders, with leaderships in all fields, if we let them be part of this, maybe a change can be reached by these people, by these young people. And it was the third arrangement of a Nahda Youth Forum. and I received an invitation to be a speaker on women empowerment. And I was really surprised because I know the organizers and they are Islamic people, and I really was not part of this Islamic society in Saudi Arabia. I know many of them are reading my articles, following my work. Some of them are moderate and reformist. But when I received the invitation, I called in the organizer, and he's a good friend of mine, and I asked him, do you think that because I knew that in the past 2 conferences, they have had very bad feedback from the Islamists for their choices of political themes of mostly controversial issues. So I asked him if it would be a good idea to have me on board, especially that now there is an Arab revolutions, and I know that there are agents who are trying to shut down the voices of or the initiatives done by the youth, especially when it comes to people empowerment or citizens empowerments. He said, we are dealing with this feedback, with the aggressive feedback, since we started the idea 2 years ago. So we can manage this, and at the worst scenario, if things are very difficult, you can just, we can just stop the whole conference. So I said, okay, and nothing happened. Things were going really smoothly, and we've received, once the announcement of the speakers and everything, there were Shiat. It was, the theme of the whole thing was the civil society, how to empower civil society, and we have quoted thinkers and leaders and initiative makers from the Arab world, from Saudi, from the GCC countries, and one author, Stephen Lacroix, who has spent some years in Saudi Arabia writing a book on awakening Islam movements, the Salafist Islam and the Ikhwani Islam. So we thought this is a very due time to discuss civil society in the region. I prepared my talk to be on women empowerment, what kind of situation that we live in, the statistics, how many women are being in the workforce, how many women are being in the GCC countries, how many in the politics, and all the statistics. And of course, have had some highlights from the CEDAW and from several international treaties and agreements on how important it is to incorporate our obligations into the public policy of our own countries, which is not happening, and why it is important for our future health, future economy, and future development. And nobody asked me what I'm going to say. Actually, it was a very free organization that they said, you can just come on and prepare whatever you want to prepare. And only a few days, I was actually doing an interview on a TV show called Equality or Musawa. And 1 week before the proceedings of the conference, we found that somebody stopped the whole thing. The Ministry of Interior in Kuwait, it was supposed to be held in Kuwait. The Ministry of Interior stopped the whole conference based on recommendation from Kuwaiti member parliament. And then we were left to answer for people. I just wanted to say at the end that it was very much a learning experience. I don't like to think that we're not empowered. It actually gave us a lot of reflection. It created a lot of movement. I gave the talk anyway to an alternative conference that was held by activists. They offered me to come and to speak through Skype, and I gave my talk, and it was well received. What I wanted to say is the reaction of men. The reaction of men was really a heartwarming thing, because they gathered and they opened a letter online, and there were 3,000 signatories on that letter that calls for tolerance, refused the censorship on free speech and expressions. And I think it made a statement that the youth do not like to be censored or prohibited from doing any initiative by themselves. I think I passed my time, so we'll open the floor.
Thank you very much. We are going to open the floor to discussions, and I really would appreciate it if you just limit your remarks to questions, and we will give the chance to all our panelists to answer your question. Let me start with a question to all of you. I mean, countries who have gone through the Arab Spring, Arab Awakening, Revolution, whatever we want to call them,
they have a lot of problems, economic problems, unemployment, lack of security and safety. Why do they focus on women's issues? I mean, why? I mean, rather than focusing on economic issues, on employment, why do they focus on whether a woman is wearing the right hijab or the wrong hijab? Why do they focus on revisiting the past law, lowering the age of marriage? Why do they focus on women's participation in politics? I mean, why that compared to all these other major problems that they can tackle? So all of you, I want brief comments from each of you. Dalia, let's start with you.
I'd like to start because actually I'm coming from a country that's now trying to do exactly what you're doing. Egypt, you know, before that, I think we had, for example, certain problems like FGM, political marginalization of women and such issues, but it was not the government at a certain time, especially in the past 10 years, were fighting against this. So it was like a cultural flow, but the government is fighting against it. What's happening now is that the government is trying to legalize the flows, to legalize FGM, to, as I was just telling you, they want to, the constituent assembly that is composed of majority Salafis, extremists, they want to let girls marry at the age of 9. And when we came out and said, this can't happen, this, you're raping a child, they insisted, and now this is a strong debate. So I think they are thinking this way of women first because they are so scared that if women are properly empowered, they will compete against them, they will encourage the society to be more liberal and more open-minded, and thus they will have no role in there in a liberal, open-minded society. And number two, they want to distract the people, to keep them from seeing where the real problems are by just looking at women. You know, there is some evil creature out there, let's get rid of them, rather than fighting against the evil deeds of the government or so.
Fahmia?
In Yemen, it is, for example, when we are asking the same question, our politicians and men, even the president, they say we have now, Yemen is going through big crisis. I mean, we have big issues, and women issues, you know, considered tribal issues in their eyes. So they don't consider it, I mean, as important as the other issues. And when you think, I mean, talk about women, they just, you can see the, I mean, a laughter in their face. I mean, they, when we speak about, for example, early marriage and something like that, I mean, they, I think there is a problem with Arabs in general, with their genes. Like, I mean, sorry, it has been. I mean, for ages, even I have read for a Turabi, you know, the Sudanese guy. He has in his book, he said, I mean, Arabs, when they fail, I mean, when they are in the weakest moments, through the history, it has been proven. I mean, they picked up women as, you know, to blame all their problems when they failed to construct their society, when they, in the history, if you look in the history, you will see like that. But when, I mean, Arabs, or, I mean, they are strong, they really think about science, about advancement, and many things like that. But,
okay. Rihab?
If I can indulge in a psychoanalysis of the Arab man. I think coming from a tribal culture where the system is in our part of the world, yes, we are Arab, but also we come from a tribal culture where the top dictates to whoever's on the bottom, and the top is the strongest, and essentially whoever's the strongest is the most male. Being incredibly disempowered over the last couple of decades, I think where the Arab man stands in his community or is in his home determines how powerful he is. Therefore, if there are no women underneath him, then he's potentially not a man, or he has no power. So when men feel emasculated or powerless, they look to assert their power by seeing who's underneath them to kind of to comfort themselves. So we saw when after the Arab Spring and the revolutions, everybody was feeling very good about themselves, and thus men let women succeed and they let them and be powerful. But as the revolution started taking a turn where it wasn't clear if people were really going to get the respect and the dignity they wanted, they reverted back to their old ways of feeling good about themselves and feeling like men. And we have an opportunity to really change this trend in our societies with these burgeoning democracies. And this is why it's perhaps even more important for Arab men than it is for Arab women that these democratic transitions succeed.
Very good. Hala, and then Omezzine.
I would say that the tribal structure.
You have to speak louder so they can hear you.
My opinion, my analysis is we live in we are part of a power setup. And the structure of the tribal system, the structure of the family, means that the woman has to do certain things, and that the gender roles, of course, is drawn from the beginning. For women to have equality inside the house and outside the house, it means that the man has to do more. The man has to give up some of the power that is in the public sphere and in the private sphere. So I think it is a question of power. Who would give away power for others, even if it's for a just cause? So you have, I think the main struggle is you have to show the men how powerful they would be if they empowered everyone and not only themselves.
Omezzine, your comments?
Yes. I don't know if it is the same in your countries, but the dictatorship we had in Tunisia stopped all people from talking, and everyone was supposed to keep for himself or herself what he thinks or thinks about what the society could be and what is the place of women in the society. So the first thing we gained is the freedom of speech. And maybe one of the consequences of the freedom of speech is everyone can say everything at any time and everywhere. And it's extremist people that would like polygamy or would like, I don't know, mutilation of women, of FGM, return back, can say that without harm, and now for the first time of their life. And also in Tunisia we had people that were very liberal and maybe we could say extremists from the other side. And women were particularly attacked, I mean accused, not to call for gay marriage or call for, I don't know, or taking photographs while drinking alcohol, I mean to hijack their Facebook accounts, just to discredit them because they had high, I mean, credibility in the society as they were fighting against the regime. And for those who were following politics, they were really figures that can federate people. You know, in Tunisia, our revolution was not a revolution behind leaders. It was a spontaneous one. And then when it ended, everyone turned back home. And they didn't want maybe a woman to be leading the movement. The thing is that also the Islamist party is the second, I would say, organization after the dictatorship party. That is the most organized, and they didn't want anyone to threaten them. And they accused all those who were secular to be with the old regime also. So it is not maybe targeting women especially, but figures that they were fighting against the regime and that could federate people behind them.
Okay. Dalia, what you mentioned, you know, that men are maybe, or all of you agreed, are worried and concerned about empowerment of women and men feeling that they might become marginalized. I just can't help but give you an example from Iran, which just happened. For a number of years, 65% of the entering classes at Iranian universities were women, 35% men. So as a result, you had roughly around 60% of women graduating from these universities and 40% of men. So the government decided that you can't have so many highly educated women because, and this was a debate in the Iranian parliament, because they will take away the employment opportunity from men because they were better educated. Although statistics, I mean, shows that 12% of these highly educated women are only employed. You know, it is not that they will grab these opportunities from men. So what they decided is to bar at 35 universities and colleges women from studying 77 different fields of education. So suddenly in a college in, let's say, northeastern Iran, women cannot study engineering. In the south, she cannot study mining. In the north, she cannot study English literature. There is no rhyme and reason for what fields, what universities choose. So that is also, you know, that is the kind of danger that one is facing, you know. But I just get a sense that maybe you women activists can somehow convince your politicians at least not to revisit women's laws that have been, you know, progressive women's laws, if that is possible. Yes, please. And could you please wait for the mic and identify yourself? Yes. Yeah. And question, please. Yes.
Hi. My name is Yessmine ElSayed Hani. I am the president of the Entrepreneurship Action Council. I'm from Saudi Arabia. And my question to the ladies is, well, first I'll preface with a remark. I believe that change happens both from the top down by changing laws and policy, but also from the bottom up by activism and also changing paradigm shifts. And like Dalia said, and some of the other ladies, you know, we don't only need to change the laws, but change the mentality. So make some constructive paradigm shifts. So what are the most effective ways to make such paradigm shifts, according to your opinion? What's the most impactful and what's the fastest?
Okay, thank you. Who wants to go first? Yes, Hala.
From my experience, I found that having good alliances with people, regardless of their agenda, in my case, the Islamist, you would find so many open people to debate and the discussion, forming networks, keeping focused on the goal, and not faltering if there is no success, because it's just a cumulative action. We're trying to build something through, I know of I can give an example. I know of an activist who has a mailing group. She sends to all her, mail list on that group a topic that she feels is going to be debated on the Shura Council or an advisory council. Let's keep this visible in the media. Let's highlight all the information that we know about it. And this simple thing creates a very good positive impact in the social networks and among the people.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think so. There are, very fast, effective ways to change them. I mean, those paradigms. So I think we have to work on a different levels. I mean, to change the mentality of the people, especially. I mean, for ages, for example, I mean, I am very curious and very, concerned to reinterpret, the religious teaching. For example, this is very important. If we just have a new law, especially by women, I mean, all the interpretations of the religious teaching have been done by, for ages, by men. So we want a new interpretations by women, moderate and with a new vision. This is very important. The other thing, yes, besides what Hala has already said, I think we have to work in empowering the women themselves, especially with education. So if you are empowered educationally, I think you are going to look, at the teaching, even with the new, we have to think outside of the box, and you have to look how to improve yourself, how to contribute to your society. So I think we need, to work on those two, beside many strategies, of course.
Dalia? Doesn't matter. Dalia and then Omezzine.
Okay, you've mentioned entrepreneurship. I think it's very, very important as a first step to change the mentality is to empower women economically, to make her the real master of the house, of her house, and then the real master of the society. And speaking about economic empowerment, I think we are in the age of the internet, and if we made good use of the internet, we can really help those women be empowered very soon. Look now on Facebook and Twitter and different pages, women from the Arab world, women even from Saudi Arabia, where they are not allowed to have their own business in public life, they are going online and making their own business, selling stuff and getting rich and thus independent in their house. So I think if you can find those women, help them properly know how to market their work, how to run their business, I think this will be the first good step for doing this, and will happen fast as well. Yeah.
So I think the
Want to add something? Sure.
I think one of the important things now that we are moving to democracies is to make all people talk about one subject. And it could not happen like this. I mean, sometimes it's not planned. And maybe I'm going to take what's happening now in Tunisia. There was a very unjust case of a woman that was raped by 3 policemen. And maybe you heard about it, because she was in a immoral position in her car with her boyfriend. So after, if it was not sufficient, the prosecutor wanted to sue her for indecent behavior. So this case was first taken by the NGOs, human rights defenders, women's rights defenders, and they brought international media attention on that. It's now possible because all the media, international media, are focusing on what's happening in our countries. So they used that powerful tool to make the political parties and representatives aware of what's happening. Sometimes they do not read newspapers, or they don't care about what's happening to women in the society. So they obliged them to take positions on that. And now I'm very optimistic, because it's the first time that women in the Constituent Assembly gathered together and decided to create a parliamentary group. And I agree with you when you say that all different parties should be around the table: Islamists, seculars, nationalists, and women, especially when it's about women issues. Because this case of rape, all women agreed that it was not something that could happen like this without any thing done afterwards, to have laws criminalizing these attempts, especially by representatives of police force. So it's mainly here it's spontaneous, because civil society began that, media followed, and then political parties were sensitized, and women felt that they needed to react, to consolidate, to network, and to unite in order to prevent this happen never again.
Rihab, you want to add something to this? Or
yeah,
no?
I would say
okay.
we did some research last year at the New Libya Foundation, civil society in general, and we discovered that, as I had mentioned, Libyan women don't have a position in the public sphere. And we discovered that as far as media use, it's not papers or internet that Libyan women use as often as television. The average respondent said she watches 5 hours or more of television a day. And with men spending so much time in the public sphere, this is essentially a one-way road to speak to women in their sphere, where they feel most comfortable. So having virtually no programming on Libyan television that's designed for women, this is a really effective, very quick way to get to women, particularly because they're incredibly disempowered, just starting to plant the seeds of empowerment and the rights that they have, and giving them an opportunity to look at rights that other women in the region or around the world have, they can start to, as a single body, demand things within their own homes and of the government.
Did you have to add
yeah,
something?
just a quick comment. I have just noticed that every country has its own specificities. I mean, working on different strategies in different communities. For example, but coming to the first square, is education to empower them economic then, and it is different. For example, in Yemen, virtual world is very limited for very few educated women. So even in Yemen, just less than 1% of people or population use the Facebook, for example. So for example, I have another small example. We are doing for the national dialogue to empower women and to enhance their participation in the national dialogue. So we have thought about it, how to reach to different women, how to let them know about what is going on, because majority of women have no clue what is the national dialogue, what's the importance of engaging the women issues in the national dialogue. So we have created two strategies. We have created a physical world. We have been, we are going to the women, ordinary women in different governorates to speak to them, to the farmers, and to have public forums and collect the issues from them. And also we have created this virtual world on the Facebook for the educated women. So we are going to collect the voices from the ground and the voices from the virtual world and mingle them and introduce them to the national dialogue to be integrated.
Barbara, can you just wait for the mic? Thank you.
Barbara Slavin from the Atlantic Council and allmonitor.com. It's very inspiring to hear all of you. I'll ask the usual Washington policy question. What should the U.S. government be doing? Are there any programs that the U.S. government currently has that is of any use to any of you? And also just for the lady from Libya, I was a little confused. You said there's one member of the parliament who's female, but there are women apparently in the government, or if you could just clarify the participation of women in Libyan official circles right now. Thank you.
I suppose Barbara came late. She didn't hear your presentation. Okay. Yeah.
So there are 200 seats in the General National Council. 120 are reserved for independent candidates that the public votes for directly, and 80 are reserved for parties, in which the citizens vote for the party, and the party determines which candidate gets the seats based on a zipper list where every other candidate has to be a female. So through independent elections, one woman was elected out of 119 men, and through the zipper list, out of 80 seats, 32 women were given positions.
Who wants to tackle the first part of the question?
Okay,
Dalia?
yes, I think the interest of Miss Hillary Clinton in particular on women's rights is very, very important. She's been promoting this for a while, and actually she's helping very much in changing several things. But still, we need more work on the grassroots level again, not only with working with governments, but it's important for decision makers here to communicate with activists on the ground, find ways to help them regardless whether the government would agree or not. In other words, don't wait for the endorsement of the Muslim Brotherhood to help women help empower women economically somewhere. It's better to go directly to the civil society groups that's working there and help them. And I don't think this is illegal or anything. It's,
Yeah.
Yes, I completely agree with Dalia. It is the right thing to do is to empower the civil society, and especially the youth, the next generation. Because at least in my country, the old generation that fought against dictatorship is very well armed, very well empowered, and I'm optimistic for the long midterm. But for long term, I don't see the youth involving very much in the process, and I think all the projects that are being imagined, maybe even by people in the small areas and in regions that are not very wealthy, it should be encouraged and funded, or maybe in the providing expertise, experiences from other countries, and build a network. And
the lady here, yes.
So hi, my name is Noor Tajouri. I am a junior at the University of Maryland studying broadcast journalism and international development conflict management. I wrote down my question so I could, because it's kind of long. So all of these countries are Muslim countries, but the government, in my opinion, they're not doing a fair representation of Islam. Like, for instance, Khadija radiallahu anha, the Prophet, peace be upon him's wife, she was one of Islam's strongest figures, and she had a successful business. She even was the one that approached him for marriage, which would probably be weird in Arab culture today. So if the Arab governments want to represent Islam and women want what's rightfully theirs, why do you think women in Islam's history and their treatment is not being used as an example for these growing countries today?
Who wants to take that?
I can take that.
Hala?
In my country, Islam is not represented as it is, as from puritanical sources. It is represented according to the Supreme Council, and it is enforced because to keep the status quo, it is very rare in any Arabic countries to see a free speech domain where scholars, free speech is not only for thinkers and leaderships, free speech is also for scholars. So scholars of Islam, I know of a few of them who are now trying to push for democracy as a principle in Islam, and they are viciously fought. So you can see that Islam is used politically, it's used as a power. And the division of equal, egalitarian society, equal power between men and women, between rulers and subjects, it is not, of course, portrayed because it is being used politically. For activists, we are trying to use that. I know of activists who are trying to use Sharia to combat the oppression of Sharia. But this is a very long struggle because of the limited freedom of speech.
Questions? Zainab, and then the back. Zainab.
Thank you very much. It's really intriguing to see very interesting women in this morning to talk about what happened after the Arab Spring and how things have developed, especially in the countries that's been formed new governments. I felt throughout the observation that I have seen in Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, and Yemen, that the force of women, or I would say the women empowerment struggle was not a front issue, was not the major issue in the agenda of many political parties. At the same time, women's effort was not united. And I felt that many women organizations were very progressive, they knew what they want, but there was some kind of pushback to put them on the side, to enable them to go in a front. Now, especially when the election came in, I felt that women did not take the front seat, especially in Egypt. Dalia, I think you remember that. And is it kind of women who are not interested in fighting to be in the front line? Or, I mean, in terms of the society and the religion and the culture, we all know about that. But in terms of how the women, I would say, movements in these countries being conducted, are they united, or because they are scattered and fighting each other, they are being pushed back? One other question for Hala is, in Saudi Arabia, we see wave of issues. We don't see one continuous effort or campaign. These women, every few years, you guys go on the street and you want to go and drive, and then 3 years goes by and no one is driving and we don't know what's going on. Why is that? Why there is no one force or group that could push and continue the struggle? Thank you.
Hala, why don't you start with the drive and get that out of the way, and then...
From my assessment, I think that the problem comes in the lack of organized and legal action. In Saudi Arabia, it is not allowed to assembly. It is not allowed to form any non-government organization. It has to be sponsored by the government. And you can understand reaching women, forming an agenda, coming up with a strategy to combat anything on the ground. It means you have to meet those women. You have to have funds. You have to educate the public. And how can you do that if you are being followed, harassed, and banned from travel, prosecuted? Some of the women are detained for such action. So you are not allowed to do these things. And we are working now on having a law that permits the civil society organization to register. We know that it will be of limited capacity. It will not have full authority, but it will enable us to be at one place. It's so many layers of oppression, so you can expect such a shattered society.
Fahmia and Dalia, and that's it. Yeah.
I fully understand, and it is maybe it is very true in Yemen, for example. Yes, women movements are not united, and their voices are scattered here and there. And I would relate that. Division. We have been divided by the political parties. I mean, politics have divided. Women voices, and it's. Sometimes it has been done on purpose. So if we are divided, they can make use of they can make use of women in all different levels. So it's, we have in the beginning of 2000, after the elections of the new president, women have, realized the importance of unifying their voices. And we have, two movements in Yemen, or two, for example, it was for the first time two women organizations got together, Women National Committee and Yemeni Women Union. So it was for the first time to sit in, when they have celebrated, it was a big conference, Women National Conference. It brought all the women from all walks of life to one place together, their voices, and also to raise their demands to the new president. So it was a successful thing, in the beginning, but still, it is not that, unification we are inspiring to. So it's women, unfortunately, are divided by political parties, and they are serving. Serving the politicians more than serving the women issues themselves.
First of all, thank you very much for the insightful question. Zainab is my ex-boss, and we worked together 2 years ago on a woman project.
Zainab is everybody's ex-boss.
He's ex-boss.
She has been a close cooperator.
Yeah, that's right. We worked together on the modern narrative for women in the Muslim world. If you remember, most of the recommendations that are written in the final report, they can be easily applied now, or we can continue. And actually, I think the problem is that in the absence of strategic planning for how to help women, the work for women's rights in the region will continue to be seasonal. Most of the civil society groups work only when they have a grant to work on a certain project, and as soon as the project is over, there is no other work, and that's it. And they forget even about the women who have been helping them, and when the women get back to them, they can't help them anymore. So this is a major problem. In Egypt in particular, the major problem with the organizations working on behalf of women's rights is that they are coming to the people with their political agenda in the background. They don't work with all women equally. Most of women's rights organizations in Egypt are leftist. They are coming from the communist era and communist political parties. So they deal with people with the same leftist concepts. They don't change their agenda or change the way they are communicating with the people to be more closer to them. The only alternative to this is the Muslim Brotherhood charity organizations, which of course they are not concerned with women's rights as much as they are concerned with the women who will vote for them in the elections. So rather than, for example, empowering them by learning, teaching them how to start a new project or so, they go and give them some money and keep them dependent on the group forever. So,
yes. Omezzine, you wanted to add something?
I wanted to add something because the context is that the women are very few in political party, and they are definitely disunite. The fact is that the men took more the struggle
against a dictatorship. So very few were brave enough to sacrifice and to be in the front lines against the dictator. Now, after the revolution, lots of women entered in political parties, but definitely they lack experience, they lack organization, and they didn't think of themselves. They just wanted to help the country, went with idealistic purposes, and maybe thought when it was the time came to talk about lists and candidates, etc., they thought they would be as they wanted. They would ask for a place and that they would have it, but it's not the case, obviously, in politics. And men that did that for 40 years know that a newcomer is also a competitor. They won't give a gift to have to be at top of the list for someone who is very new and they don't know even they can rely on them. Because you know the confidence also in people is anchored in the mentalities of people who fought dictatorship. They don't accept anyone, even if with a new context they should accept new people. So women are disunited, but I think now after this first experience they see that they should have an organization and to lobby for themselves, at least maybe be behind one figure or two figures and push her to be as candidate, but she had to open door for other women, because otherwise we talk about women's solidarity, but it cannot be women's solidarity if there is only one who is in a place and she closes the door behind, so she is the only one to lead. The most important for us, I think, is that all women who want to take part in the new democracy can have the right place, and they cannot be egos battle, but should unite, and even with all kind of ideologies. I mean, this is the most important.
Let me close the first panel by quoting the former American Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, who always, whenever she addresses women's groups, says there is a special place for women in hell who don't help other women. So at that, please, we are going to take really a short break, 15 minutes. In 10 minutes, I want the second panel to come here so they will be wired, and you are in for another very exciting panel. Join me in thanking the panelists.